What's the stupidest statement you ever heard from someone, and they were dead serious? Story 1. My barber told me that instead of vaccines which cause autism, we should just inject people with a very weak form of the virus so our bodies can build natural immunity. He later told me that COVID had gone viral. Story 2. Our son had managed to pee on our bed when I was changing his diaper, just infant things. So I handed him and a sleeper to my husband and asked him to get him dressed while I stripped the bed to wash everything. He responds, how am I supposed to get him dressed if I'm holding him? The baby was dressed by the time I came back, so he somehow puzzled it out. Story 3. I've shared this before, but a coworker, pointing at a street sign across the road from us, trying to explain how bad his vision is without glasses. Look how blurry that is to me. Story 4. I'm from the States and was in New Zealand with 2 work colleagues. The moon was out and one colleague asked the other, Mike, is that the same moon that we have in California? Story 5. My mother-in-law, when my 10-year-old was a baby, breastfeeding him will turn him gay, and formula is better anyways. I'll just sneak him formula when I have him. Story 6. Job interviewer. Do you have experience doing XYZ? Me. Yes, I've done it in the past. Job interviewer. I didn't ask if you've done it in the past. I asked if you have experience with it. Surprisingly, I didn't get the job. Story 7. Called to see why my pizza hadn't been delivered. The lady said I didn't have an order. I said okay, well you charged me. She said, just how would you even know that we charged you unless you just went and got your bank statement just now, and I know you didn't cause it's night. Then she hung up on me and the pizza guy rang my doorbell and told me he was sorry, he was stuck in traffic. Story 8. I'd rather my daughter die fighting than survive being raped and have to live like that. No man would ever want to marry her. He genuinely believed, and likely still does, that rape survivors are damaged goods, and thus it would be better for someone to die fighting off their rapist. This was also the most horrifying thing I've ever heard someone say in complete seriousness. Story 9. Aren't mentally ill people just overcome by demons? Why don't they just pray more? I don't understand why they don't just put more faith in God. This came from someone at the church I went to as a kid, who then told the church about my mother, who then told my mother not to come back, who was very mentally ill. The pastor sent us a letter saying, unfortunately we must ask you to no longer come to our church. Your family must not have enough faith in God to heal. Insert my mom's name from her demons, and we do not feel comfortable with her in our church, or something like that. Story 10. Oh, probably my mom. I was telling her after her prodding that if I ever had children, they will not be baptized as neither my wife nor I are religious. Her reply, verbatim, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with if the baby dies, they still go to heaven. Weird thing, Ish is not particularly religious herself. Just a sort of Christmas Catholic. Story 11. Many years ago, I was working in emergency when the paramedics brought in a patient in cardiac arrest. They were belting down the hallway to the trauma room, one paramedic on top of the patient stretcher doing CPR, another running along with the stretcher bagging the patient. Code team was being paged, everyone was running. The supervisor of admitting attached to the ER, witnessing this entire event, said in all earnestness, gee, I wonder if it's anything serious. One of her staff gently informed her, yes, a code blue is always serious. The patient didn't make it, she was a supervisor. Story 12. I worked with a guy who thought that men had a penis bone. That's how it gets hard. That's why it's called a, he said, he had like 4 kids with 4 different women. Not sure if it makes no sense at all or complete sense that he didn't know how it works. Story 13. I had a buddy explain to me that Mazel Tov cocktails were named for an Israel-Palestine conflict. I didn't have the heart to tell him because we were in public and I didn't want to embarrass him. Story 14. Roommate who was drying the dishes said to me, who was washing the dishes, hey, you don't need to scrub the bottoms of the plates as much. We don't eat off of that side. Me. Think about how we stack the clean ones on the shelf. Story 15. I had someone ask me if a town 1 hour outside of my city, same province and country, just a short drive away, still celebrated Canada Day. I had one girl in my class who genuinely believed that Babe Ruth was a football player. Despite half the class correcting her immediately, she thought we were with her. I had a guy try to convince that allergies are made up, not a real thing, and when I explained that is objectively false, he told me the 2 times I went into anaphylaxis was all in my head. He got so angry he showed up at my job trying to convince me to eat foods I am literally allergic to. Story 16. I've been doing the surgery in my head, and according to my physics it should be fine. My business major CEO, when trying to convince me, head of RD, to release some navigation surgical instruments that were out of spec, my husband sometimes says according to my physics just to wind me up. Story 17. I was a director for a large sneaker company based out of Philadelphia. This was right after the shootings in Ferguson. Our company was 95 black. The employees felt that corporate was not doing New York enough to spotlight the injustice. We flew all 5,000 employees out to the Philadelphia Convention Center. Our CEO was beloved and always did for the black community. He gave a quick speech and he was applauded. Our CEO said, thanks Jason, but I want people to know one thing, that more white people are killed by police than black people on an annual basis. The place erupted. The investors wanted out ASAP. I watched a 200 sneaker chain get sold to a company just 2 years sooner. We were going to buy. In 5 seconds, the CEO erased 150 to 200 million in market cap. I have never seen something so egregious in business. The guy is a raging narcissist. I almost threw him out of the building several times. Story 18. Watching a movie that was set in the 1950s and a character said or some such, The person I was watching the movie with got upset and said they didn't talk like that back then, and he was serious. I laughed and laughed. Story 19. I was in the theater with my mom and we were watching the movie Valkyrie. Valkyrie is about the failed plot to assassinate Hitler. Spoiler alert. I guess, halfway through the movie, my mom leans over and asks, the Nazis are the bad guys, right? Story 20. I used to be a substitute class aide and was helping out in the cafeteria for lunch. There was a kid with no arms eating lunch with his feet, minding his own business. Another sub went up to the kid, looked him right in the eye, and said, you know, it's really rude to eat with your feet. There was a noticeable pause before the kid said, this is how I have to eat. She then realized how far deep her foot was in her mouth, and quickly walked away. Story 21. A women straight-faced told a group of us that when you are baptized the DNA in your cells forms a crucifax or something, and that even science could see it with their microscopes. That part was a direct quote and has become an inside joke for my entire family, and this was like years ago. Story 22. I was scrolling Facebook and saw a post about a scene from the CG animated Polar Express movie. In the scene, a Christmas tree was on top of a compass inlay, but all of the points on the compass were labeled south because the children were at the North Pole. Cute little joke. A bunch of people in the comments were arguing that the scene proved that the Earth was flat, a scene from an animated movie. I was totally flabbergasted. I just don't know if we're going to make it as a species. Story 23. What do you mean, you had mono in high school? You told me you never had any STIs. FK an idiot. I got it sharing a can of Mr. Pibb with my friend Jess at lunch. It's 100, not an STI. Story 24. A traditional Scottish claymore sword weighed over 100 pounds. Never mind the examples in museums that weigh in under 10 pounds. And when I told him I'd just seen one made by a bladesmith that weighs under 5 pounds, he replied that defies the laws of physics. I gave up asking who would even be able to lift a 100-pound sword, much less effectively wield one in a fight. Story 25. A family member had a bad cold. I was known for carrying a large 64-ounce thermos cup from 7 to 11. She brings it over to me, sick as can be, runny nose, poor girl's been hacking and coughing all night, low fever. She hands me my drink and says, I found this for you. I took a drink. I say, oh okay. She replies, but it's okay. I turned the straw upside down so you wouldn't get sick. Me, oh okay. Her family rolling on the couches and howling with laughter let her know shed said something off. She was way older and more intelligent than this story suggests. 002. Story 26. A fairly smart friend of mine was arguing with me about the sun not being a star. I can't remember the specific, but he said it's a sun, not a star. There was a whole reasoning behind his argument. I had to explain that every star is the sun of its own solar system. Some stars don't have planets, some do. Some systems have multiple suns flopping around. It took far too long to win that argument, and it took a lot of self-restraint to not go nuclear, no pun intended. Story 27. Telling you they're pro-life and supporting capital punishment, gun registration, and neglecting anything that happens to an infant after it stops being a fetus. Story 28. We should head over to Boston Pizza for some drinks until the power in our apartment turns back on. Power outage. How is my car supposed to start with no power? Story 29. The solution to school shootings in the US was to put a gun in every classroom. They saw no flaw in the plan. Of course kids wouldn't find it. Of course no high schoolers will try to steal. No innocents would be put in danger by addition gunfire. My eyes rolled so hard I could see the back of my skull. Story 30. Had an argument with a guy at work who insisted Mexico was in South America. He eventually conceded, fine, Central America, whatever. When I told him Mexico is in North America, he called me stupid and stormed off. Story 31. Once I was at a diner with a group of friends and a commercial came on for one of those animatronic dinosaur events that was coming to town. A girl that was with us was like, wait, so are they real dinosaurs? She was serious. Another friend was sarcastically like, yeah, they got their DNA from mosquitoes trapped in amber, and we all laughed and she just said, oh anyways, she's a nurse now. Story 32. Me and my roommate and a few friends were having a conversation and somehow landed on cancer as a subject. He says that all cancer is 100 man-made. Like, cancer wasn't a thing until modern man introduced it unto themselves. A genuinely intelligent guy, if not a little on the conspiracy theory side of things. I assured him cancer has been around as long as cells have been dividing, citing the sun and radon gas, two completely natural phenomenon outside the control of man. He doubled down and I just let him have it. What can you say? Story 33. Then while I'm professionally detailing your car, I will shoot high-pressure water in through your door's speaker covers. That will clean your speakers right up. I think you will not. Story 34. Overheard a few teenagers on a date, probably first date, and their conversation went to religion, and the dude's key point as to why he doubted the Bible was that Jesus turned water into wine and alcohol hadn't even been invented yet. Story 35. If you stay in a bathtub long enough you'll evolve into a mermaid. This was in HS and was a serious statement in bio class. I think she went on to do pre-med. Story 36. I didn't think she could get pregnant because she was in cheerleading and was moving around a lot, plus I came in her before and she didn't get pregnant that time. Story 37. Work in hospo and one of our protein for salad options was corn-fed chicken. Legit, this customer was so excited because vegetarians now had a protein source for their salad. Had to explain that it was still poultry. They were adamant because it was corn-fed it was okay for vegetarians. Story 38. It's a tie between these two. The COVID vaccine makes you sterile. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce relationship is just part of the deep state trying to control us. We seriously thought they were making a joke and busted out laughing. They got extremely angry and started yelling at us. Story 39 Women perform better than men do at the Olympics. How do you figure that? Look at how many gold medals the US women teams won this year, aside from the fact that we are Canadian. Aside from the fact that men perform better across the board in practically every individually scored event, you do realize that there is a winner in every event, right? So, for every woman that wins, a woman loses. Not as much as men though. What are you talking about? Story 40 I don't want to hear logic. Customer visits the bank and gives bank consent to call her on her mobile number. Customer receives suspicious call later that day where caller claims to be from the bank. Customer calls customer service to complain about perceived security breach. Customer was not receptive to likely explanation and screamed my ear off. Story 41 Ex-sister-in-law once tried to justify why yawns are contagious. She said because it changes the air pressure in the room. I just looked at her and asked what happened if someone yawned outside. She just looked at me confused. She was dead serious. We talk about this story quite frequently. Story 42 Not over the internet, but from Trump voting women. I considered friends that Democrats are doing adrenochrome harvest blood rituals using children. Oprah took girls from her schools in Africa to Epstein's Islands. Bonus: the vaccine was created by Democrats to make black men infertile and get elderly off Social Security to reduce spending. Story 43 I knew someone that was AMD truly brainwashed by Canon. And she really got involved by making videos and having a Telegram group, and she would make the most outrageous statements you could ever imagine. It was so funny that we made a Facebook page just to laugh at them. There are tunnels underground that are like huge cities with shops and restaurants etc., and they are used to breed children specifically so the cabal can abuse them. They all have colostomy bags etc. because their rectums have been torn to pieces from all the abuse, but Trump is going to rescue them all, and she fully 100 believed all the bullshit. Story 44 I know someone who believes that the whole COVID outbreak was engineered by governments to control the people. No one died from contracting it and vaccines are more government control. It's a slap in the face for everyone who's lost a loved one or been really sick from it. You can't reason with him about it. He also thinks the earth is 5,000 years old. Yes, he believes everything in the Bible. Story 45 A female coworker asked to be excused due to female issues from a meeting, and our boss looked at her and said, "Dead serious. Can't you hold it until after the meeting?" The meeting was on workplace harassment and safe environments. Story 46 came from me, looking at a pot of boiling water on the stove. Wonder why it bubbles like that. Mom, you don't know what happens to water when it hits 212 degrees. Mind you, I was a second-year engineering student when this happened. Still hurts. Story 47 I don't wear seatbelts. Why? Because when I die is up to God, seatbelt or not. It's more dangerous for other people in the car if you don't wear one. It makes you a projectile. She shrugged. So you don't care if it hurts or kills someone else. Then that's their time and God's will. There was a lot of weight. Are you being serious? In between this. She then said she was at the Vegas shooting and didn't die because God saved her and it wasn't her time. Religious people are up. Story 48 If we run fast enough we can catch up with the bus. We were both out-of-shaped people with over 50 pounds of groceries each and they wanted us to run after a bus that drove past us at like 45 miles per hour. Story 49 I used to pass a restaurant on the way to work called El Barco and if the sign had a picture of a boat on it so you'd think context clues would be enough to figure out what it meant. For some reason it came up one day and one of the guys said that El Barco place is a restaurant. I should take my wife there. She loves dogs. Story 50 Let's write an article about credit card debt and compare it to slavery. This from a PR guy. The weekend after 12 years a slave won the Academy Award for Best Picture. His direct report was a woman of color who was in the room when he said this. I was furious. Went to my boss to express my concerns. She accused me of creating a toxic work environment. Story 51 Years ago, a friend was asking me for computer advice. I asked him how big was his hard drive and he held up his fingers and said about this big. Story 52 My sister, who has a law degree and thinks she is the smartest person ever born, was once arguing with a pharmacist about the efficacy of taking hydroxychloroquine to ward off COVID at a Zoom social event we both were attending. She insisted that since she'd been taking the drug for 4 weeks and had not gotten COVID, thus it must have been working. Story 53 Kim K, lamenting about how difficult it is for her to be a single parent. I don't like to be violent, but hearing her saying that was making me feel violent towards her. Story 54 I don't think you should get married because children are the point of marriage. This was literally seconds after I had expressed my fear of having children because I don't want to FCK up a small human, and I personally am terrified of childbirth. They claimed that what they were saying was biblical, and that I wasn't being a good Christian. BC I basically said that I wasn't going to be like my mom and immediately start popping out 11 babies, and I wanted to wait to have kids, and I wasn't honestly even sure if kids were the right thing for me. Story 55 Guy had a zip or similar compressed file on a computer at home that was supposed to have some government secrets and he was trying to crack it, and he said the cracking software so far has managed to guess the first 3 letters because he thought it worked the same as in the movies. Story 56 A man, I worked with this lady and mentioned I'd like to see a dietitian, so she told me about her nutritionist who, paraphrasing here, had her hold on to 2 metal rods while balancing vitamins on her feet to measure which ones her body needed. She said she wasn't smart enough to know the science, but when he explained it, it made total sense. Story 57. My friend Tony is the stupidest human being alive. They argued with me, at length, that the brain was on the outside of the skull to protect the skull, also that not wearing shoes while driving is the most dangerous thing about a car accident. They also spoke in English sorry to waitstaff at a Vietnamese restaurant so they could understand her better. Unsurprisingly, she also had a white supremacy summer we had to collectively shame her out of. Story 58. Plants aren't alive. We were in college and she was dead serious. She said plants don't have feelings, they're not alive, as if I was the for saying feelings aren't a requirement for life. Story 59. Somebody successfully developed a carburetor that would allow an engine to run on water. The government snatched up the design and won't release it because they're in cahoots with big oil. I tried to explain the science behind how stupid that statement was, but I was talking to a man with a second-grade understanding of the subject. Story 60. We will all be white in paradise, said by a black-skinned teenager brainwashed by her own parents and family to hate her own skin. That was so sad to hear. Story 61. A student of medicine recently said that she doesn't believe in evolution. You know, the set of theories that modern medicine fundamentally rests upon. Yeah, that's not real, but the medication still vibes hard somehow. Story 62. On my wife's cousin's birthday on August 30th. Isn't your birthday on August 31st? Only in some years leap years. Yeah, it's not leap year. Story 63. Was talking to a patient about dietary habits and she said she consumed a large amount of milk. I asked what type of milk. She seemed confused. I said, like, is it cow's milk, goat milk, soy, where does it come from? She said the store. Story 64. I went to take a sip from a water bottle while driving once. My friend in the passenger seat goes, dude, don't you know it's illegal to drink and drive? He was dead serious at the age of 25 years. He made it to 25 years of age believing this. I will never forget. I refuse to forget. I must not let him live this down. Story 65. When I was in the US and mentioned to a group that I had recently flown from Australia, and one guy asked why I didn't drive. And when I mentioned the oceans, he asked why they hadn't built a bridge yet. I started laughing until I saw he was deadly serious. Story 66. I used to work at a retail store where the employees wore a red uniform. A common joke we'd make was we look like a blood clot if there was multiple colleagues gathered together chatting. One time I made the joke, everyone in the group laughed, except one girl, who instead replied, "What's blood?" Story 67. I worked as a docent and guide at a wildlife sanctuary for 10 years. My in-laws came for a tour and we had stopped by the Siberian tiger exhibit. Father-in-law deadass says, you know, when he looks at me he respects me as a fellow predator. I responded with, when he looks at you, he sees the slowest, stupidest member of the herd. Things went downhill after that. Story 68. It's me. Because whether it is whenever the person at the concession stand has said, enjoy your movie, or any waitstaff has just brought me my order and said, enjoy your meal, or when the hotel clerk who just handed me my room key says, enjoy your stay, or when the airport staffer who just handed me back my passport says either enjoy your flight, or welcome to the United States, I always respond without fail, thanks, you too. I don't know what's wrong with me. But it isn't getting better. I imagine that when I die, St. Peter will tell me, welcome to heaven, and I will reply thanks you too, at which point he will immediately send me down to, and I will not protest, because the truth is that I know that I deserve this fate. Incels are male feminists. Story 69. They were flabbergasted that and very matter-of-factly told me that the tray with holes shouldn't have leaked that much liquid because she put parchment paper on it before cooking the 3 whole chickens in the oven. I looked at her dumbfounded, literally at a loss for words. All I could muster to say was I ain't cleaning that mess. Story 70. Back in the early 1990s, I overheard a couple of women on a train who were talking about a nurse, Beverly Alit, who was in the news at the time for killing babies in a hospital. Yes, she's got Stockhausen syndrome apparently. Story 71. That the earth is flat. A former friend was extremely certain that it was the case, so I asked him if we went up a mountain and looked with my telescope we should be able to see Denmark. We live at the west coast in Sweden. He agreed that we would. A few days later we went up the biggest mountain we could find where we lived and hauled my big telescope up the mountain to see Denmark. Surprised we didn't see Denmark, but we saw a few ships or half of the ships because the rest was past the curvature. He then said that I had done something to the telescope so it would look like that, and it was even more proof of the conspiracy to hide it. Story 72. They did not buy a lottery ticket until the amount was more than the odds of the chances of winning, i.e. odds of winning are 1 in 50 million, so they would not buy a ticket until the jackpot was more than 50 million. Story 73. Sunglasses cause cancer because white people can't absorb melanin. The source was some dude on YouTube. This person was also unsurprisingly a flat earther. I'm a little hazy on the details, but I think she generally didn't believe in space either. After many frustrating conversations about the evidence against a flat earth literal space existing, I finally asked why, and she just said she couldn't see it for herself. I was like, you mean like through a telescope, like I've seen Saturn through a telescope, is that what you mean? To which she just said oh and seemed to give it some thought. Story 74. You aren't supposed to financially benefit from your education. My mom is a real piece of. I got a notice one day in college that my housing had been revoked due to a lack of funds. This confused me because that money was coming out of my student loans and there was way more than enough to cover it. So I go and talk to the clerk and long story short, she managed to con someone into reimbursing her as my landlord with that money. So my housing payments had been going directly from my loan amount to her. No one contacted me about this at any point in time, and she wound up stealing about $9,000 from me before I caught it. The school wouldn't reverse it, and I couldn't afford a lawyer to go after her. So for the last 2 years of my undergrad I was homeless, living on friends' couches or at my girlfriend's dorm room. After I graduated and managed to get back home, I confronted her about it, and after trying to gaslight me, someone else must have taken the money, she finally gave up and hit me with, "I was just sick of you living high on the hog in your apartment with free food while I was over here starving." She lives in a very big house, and between her and my stepdad they were very comfortably middle class. It's wrong. You aren't supposed to financially benefit from your education. School is supposed to be hard and you're supposed to survive on ramen and water. Turns out she took all the money she could out of their accounts and mine, stole a bunch of things from family members and fed it all into a gambling turned meth addiction. Sorry, it's been 20 years. I'm still very angry. Story 75, that if Trump didn't win the election then he should come to Canada and try to run things up here. This was said in 2016, 2020, and 2024. When I reminded this individual that Trump only cares about rich white men and everybody else deserves to be happy screwed over, and that they themselves as a woman of color, their reply was, "Yeah, but my husband's a rich white man." Each time I just walked away instead of telling them making $42,000 a year doesn't make him rich. Story 76, a person with AIDS is healthy than a person HIV negative because they can't get a illness. It hurt me beyond imagination and still hurting now almost 10 years later. Story 77, my sister was 17 when she got her first period. When it finished she called me and said, "I'm so glad it's over. I hated it." Me, "Well, now you're more prepared for next month." Her, "What do you mean next month?" Me, "You know you'll get it every month until you're in your 50s, right?" Her, "No you don't. That's not even funny, why would you say that?" She melted down for almost an hour. Still can't believe she thought it was a one-time deal. Story 78, in high school chemistry, our teacher did the OL copper wire in silver nitrate experiment in front of the class. If you aren't familiar, or you forgot, you stick a copper wire in a solution of silver nitrate and water, and silver crystallizes on the wire. This girl in front of me, who had always been something of an idiot, was very excited and no hand raised. Asked if that's how they make silver. I should take a moment to say that this teacher was very much the type that was noticeably judgmental about her students' intelligence. It came out in her snark. She was very snarky, and unfortunately, even in the way she taught, she was an amazing teacher and very funny. If you were good at chemistry, otherwise not so much. The class was dead silent. The teacher stared at this girl, mouth agape, for several seconds, literally at a loss for words. I say literally because she started to try and say something several times, but just trailed off every time. Eventually, she decided to just resume talking about the reaction, as if nothing had happened. And that, of course, made the class, who had been nobly restraining themselves for the past minute, totally break down, and she had to wait another minute or so for the laughter to stop. Story 79, I went to college in New York, and one weekend I went on a road trip to Niagara Falls, Ontario, with a few friends. The plan was to do the typical tourist things and then go out drinking that night, since the drinking age in Ontario is only 19. When we got to the border crossing, the Canadian customs agent asked, "What are your plans for tonight?" The driver, my friend's boyfriend, replied, "We are going to Canada." Customs agent's response, "They just keep getting smarter and smarter every carload." Story 80, is it true wind turbines are gas started? From a man whose wife is now the district's head of education, and was in the Air Force as an avionics technician. Story 81, my MIL once said that the mob was behind the events of 9/11. This was in the few weeks after, when information was still being discovered, but I couldn't help but think that was probably the dumbest theory I'd heard. I literally had no words to respond to her. Story 82, when I was a biology student, someone said they wanted to specialize in whales because they were interested in fish, so they thought whales and, by extension, all other oceanic mammals were fish. That was at the end of second year, at a university. Story 83, during the early stages of COVID, Trump was giving daily updates. My downstairs neighbor and I got on the elevator. She said she wanted to get his latest update. I told her that there would be lies in whatever he said. She said, "Oh, Trump doesn't lie. I'm sure there's been other dumb things, but this is one I remember." Story 84, black coworker told me in complete earnest that she liked Trump and was going to vote for him until she found out that if he was elected he was going to enslave all of the black people working for the government. I didn't even know where to start, so I just said, "Wow, I didn't know that," and walked away. Story 85, it's not stupid as such, because some people just don't have the education and it's not their fault, but as a nurse I have been astounded time and time again how little some people know about their own bodies. We have 2 lungs. Story 86, had my ex look me dead in the face while watching a nature show on snakes. That snake hatched a bunch of baby snakes. Do you think it has enough nipples to feed them all? I kid you not. Unfortunately he has reproduced not with me. Story 87, my buddy told me to take an anti-hysterectomy tablet to help me with my hay fever. I started laughing my off, and he grabbed me by the arm and said, "No, seriously mate, ITLL protect you." Story 88, a very high and drunk friend after a party said, "I just need to get behind the wheel to get my head straight," after he was asked if he was okay because he was slurring and stumbling around. One of us ended up driving him home. Story 89, we had this lady at work. She was not very bright. She would be calling me every 5 seconds over the headset for something that she should know, having worked there for 10 years versus my 6 months. It was so bad that the store manager would have us shift leads and managers switch weekends of who worked shifts with her, because we'd barely get any work done if we worked a shift with her due to her calling us to the front every 3 to 7 minutes like clockwork. One day she asks me over the headset, a customer on the phone is asking if we have electric blankets. This was right before the big freeze hit Texas in 2020. I told her yes, we have heated throws, they're on aisle X and they cost Y. For some reason I had just been on that aisle and seen that product, so I knew the information right offhand. She comes back on the headset, are they electric? Every employee who was wearing a headset burst into laughter. You could hear them all across the store, except me. I just stood there for a second, processing what she just asked me and slow blinking for a couple of seconds. Mouth agape, she had finally broken me, I had to reset. I finally booted back up and pushed the button on the headset. Why yes, they are electric, okay, thank you. Story 90. In response to being proven wrong, a manager once said dismissively, yeah, well you can prove anything with facts, that's kind of the point of facts. Story 91. The shop I worked in sold natural crystals. She picked one up, looked at it, then straight-faced asked me where it came from. I asked her what she meant, she looked really confused. I showed her the little card that came with them, and it showed the origin. Again she looked confused. She asked why we had lies about where they came from. This time, I was confused. I asked her where she thought they came from. She looked at me deadpan and said she didn't know. I literally had to tell her that natural crystals came from underground. She looked flabbergasted. She was with a few friends and they all started walking upstairs. She followed. One friend staggered behind, looked at me, and said she would no longer be friends with someone so stupid. Story 92. In nursing school, a fellow student raised her hand and asked, completely serious, if the air inside a colostomy bag smells bad. For those unfamiliar, that's called a. Story 93. I was telling someone how much I loved the movie District 13. He said, I don't want to watch a documentary. I had explained to him aliens didn't actually appear in South Africa. They just filmed parts of it like was a news story. Story 94. My half-brother thought that people who self-harm are faking because they usually cut horizontally on the wrists instead of down. Yeah, no, do not know what self-harm is, pretty brain dead, half of the reason I hate him.